The grand marble chamber of the Supreme Court fell into a tense silence as Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett approached the podium. Her striking cobalt blue suit stood out against the somber wood paneling, a deliberate choice that signaled confidence without ostentation. At 43, the freshman representative from Texas carried herself with the composed determination of someone who had fought and won difficult battles long before entering politics. Justice Clarence Thomas observed her with barely concealed skepticism from his seat at the far right of the bench. The court's most senior member, with over 3 decades of experience, had developed a reputation for his conservative jurisprudence and skepticism toward expansive interpretations of civil rights protections. In recent years, he had become increasingly vocal during oral arguments, often asking pointed questions that revealed his doubts about progressive legal theories. The case, Wilson County Voters Coalition versus Texas Election Commission, challenged new voting restrictions that plaintiffs claimed systematically disadvantaged minority communities through reduced polling places, strict ID requirements, and limited early voting hours. As both a sitting congresswoman and a former civil rights attorney with extensive trial experience, Crockett had been granted the unusual opportunity to argue before the nation's highest court. The stakes couldn't be higher. With major elections approaching, the court's ruling would potentially impact voting access for millions of Americans and set precedent for similar laws being enacted across the country. The tension in the room was palpable as Chief Justice Roberts nodded for Crockett to begin. She had barely completed her opening statement when Justice Thomas leaned forward, activating his microphone. What followed would begin as a direct challenge to her personal and professional integrity that shocked even seasoned court observers, but would end with a response so powerful and devastating that it would leave Thomas visibly stunned and potentially reshape the national conversation on voting rights for years to come. Before we dive into this incredible confrontation that has everyone talking, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more coverage of the most important legal and political battles shaping America's future. The morning had begun with the usual formalities of the Supreme Court. The marshal had called the court to order, and the justices had entered in their black robes, taking their seats behind the elevated bench. The audience, consisting of legal scholars, journalists, civil rights leaders, and members of the public fortunate enough to secure a seat, watched attentively as Crockett arranged her materials at the podium. "Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court," Crockett began with practiced composure, "the right to vote is fundamental to our democracy. When that right is systematically burdened for some citizens more than others based on race, both the Constitution and the Voting Rights Act demand judicial intervention." She had barely finished this introduction when Justice Thomas activated his microphone. "Congresswoman Crockett," he began, emphasizing her political title rather than addressing her as counsel. "Before we proceed with legal arguments, I have a concern that goes to the heart of your presentation before this court today." The unusual opening caused several journalists in the press section to look up from their notes. Thomas was departing from typical questioning about legal doctrine or factual claims. He seemed to be raising a preliminary issue about Crockett herself. "You come before this court not just as an attorney, but as an elected official with a particular political agenda," Thomas continued, his tone growing more pointed. "You've repeatedly made public statements accusing state legislators of intentional racism without evidence. You've compared these voting regulations to Jim Crow laws. You've even suggested that judges who uphold such laws are complicit in discrimination. The courtroom fell completely silent. Thomas wasn't questioning a legal theory or factual claim. He was directly challenging Crockett's professional integrity and impartiality as an advocate. Given these inflammatory public statements, Thomas continued, how can this court be confident that you're presenting objective legal arguments rather than political rhetoric disguised as constitutional claims? Doesn't your apparent bias compromise your credibility as an officer of the court? The question hung in the air. It was a stunning departure from typical judicial inquiry, a direct challenge to an advocate's professional ethics and integrity before the highest court in the land. Several observers noticed Justice Jackson shift uncomfortably in her seat, while Justice Alito appeared to nod slightly in agreement with Thomas's characterization. The courtroom remained silent, all eyes on Crockett. The attack had been unprecedented in its directness and personal nature. Many advocates might have wilted under such pressure, become defensive, or responded with indignation that would have undermined their credibility. What happened next would be replayed millions of times across social media and analyzed by legal experts for years to come. Crockett stood perfectly still, maintaining direct eye contact with Justice Thomas. She took a deliberate breath, and when she spoke, her voice was calm, clear, and carried an unmistakable force that commanded complete attention. Justice Thomas, you've questioned my integrity as an advocate based on my public statements about voting rights, she began. With the court's permission, I'd like to respond directly to this serious charge. Chief Justice Roberts nodded slightly, and Crockett continued. In 1991, during your confirmation hearings, you were asked about your views on Roe v. Wade. You testified, under oath, that you had never discussed that case, had no opinion on it, and hadn't even thought about it. The courtroom remained utterly silent as Crockett continued. Yet, in your private speeches before conservative groups like the Federalist Society, speeches initially kept from public view, you had explicitly criticized Roe. In memos from your time in the Reagan administration, you had written extensively about abortion rights cases. And as the New York Times reported, multiple colleagues from that period confirmed you had frequently discussed Roe, expressing clear opinions about it. Thomas's expression changed almost imperceptibly, but those watching closely could see his jaw tighten slightly. In 2011, you failed to disclose that your wife received over $680,000 from the Heritage Foundation, a group with direct interest in multiple cases before this court. You continued to rule on cases involving January 6th, despite your wife's documented involvement in efforts to overturn the 2020 election. And you've repeatedly ruled on cases involving your former clerk's organization without recusal. Crockett's voice remained measured but carried absolute moral clarity. Justice Thomas, you've questioned my integrity for making public statements that voting restrictions disproportionately burden minority communities, a fact documented by multiple federal courts and supported by extensive statistical evidence. Yet, you've repeatedly participated in cases where you had clear conflicts of interest without disclosure or recusal, and you've made statements under oath that documentary evidence directly contradicts. The silence in the courtroom deepened. In less than 30 seconds, Crockett had not merely defended herself, she had turned the tables completely, exposing Thomas's own documented ethical issues. while he sat before her on the nation's highest bench. But she wasn't finished. Her voice took on a quality of controlled intensity that held the entire room transfixed. I stand by every public statement I have made about voting rights, because they're supported by evidence admitted in federal court. My positions aren't based on personal bias, but on the documented reality of how these laws operate and who they affect. That's not political rhetoric. It's factual truth that any judge committed to equal justice should be willing to acknowledge. She paused for a moment, then delivered her most powerful point. Justice Thomas, with the greatest respect for this court as an institution, when you question my integrity based on public statements about voting rights, while your own record includes undisclosed conflicts and contradicted testimony, it forces me to ask, is your concern really about my integrity, or is it about deflecting attention from the evidence showing these laws disproportionately burden minority voters? The courtroom remained in stunned silence. Crockett had responded to Thomas's attack not with defensive justification, but by exposing his own documented ethical issues, while simultaneously redirecting focus to the substantive evidence in the case. She had done it without raising her voice or showing anger, just stating documented facts with moral clarity that left Thomas visibly taken aback. For several seconds, Thomas said nothing. His expression, typically impassive during oral arguments, now reflected what observers would later describe as stunned disbelief that an advocate had responded to his attack with such a direct and factually specific counter. Chief Justice Roberts, clearly sensing the extraordinary tension in the chamber, intervened. Let's proceed to the legal issues in this case. Thomas turned off his microphone without response. For the remainder of Crockett's argument, he did not ask another question, his silence and expression speaking volumes about the impact of her 30-second response. Other justices engaged with the substance of Crockett's legal arguments. Justice Kagan inquired about the specific evidence of discriminatory impact. Justice Barrett asked about the appropriate remedy if the court found some, but not all provisions unconstitutional. Throughout, Crockett responded with composed expertise, citing specific precedents, factual evidence, and constitutional principles. When Crockett's time expired and she returned to her seat, legal observers in the courtroom exchanged meaningful glances. They had witnessed something extraordinary, a moment when an attempt to publicly question an advocate's integrity had been met with a response so powerful and factually specific that it had effectively silenced one of the court's most vocal justices and potentially shifted the terms of the debate itself. The impact of the confrontation between Justice Thomas and Congresswoman Crockett spread far beyond the Supreme Court chamber. As the session concluded and spectators filed out, the hushed whispers in the hallway quickly erupted into animated discussions. Journalists rushed to file their stories, legal commentators scrambled to analyze the implications, and social media exploded with reactions. By the time Crockett descended the marble steps of the court, news crews were already assembled. Reporters shouted questions about her exchange with Thomas. Maintaining her professionalism, Crockett responded, "Today wasn't about any personal exchange, but about ensuring the court understands the real impact of these voting restrictions on citizens' fundamental rights. The Constitution and the Voting Rights Act provide crucial protections, and I was honored to present those arguments to the court." Her measured response in the face of what many were already describing as an extraordinary confrontation only enhanced the growing public impression of her as not just a skilled advocate, but a person of unusual integrity. Within hours, Jasmine Crockett exposes Thomas, and number 30 seconds were trending nationwide. Video clips of the exchange, officially released by the court days later, but described in detail by eyewitnesses, spread across social media platforms at lightning speed, accumulating millions of views. Jasmine Crockett just delivered the most powerful response to an attack on integrity I have ever seen, using nothing but documented facts to expose the hypocrisy of her accuser, tweeted one prominent legal commentator, garnering over 500,000 likes within hours. Cable news networks quickly assembled panels of legal experts to discuss the confrontation. On CNN, Jeffrey Toobin called it one of the most extraordinary moments I have witnessed in 30 years covering the Supreme Court, a justice directly questioning an advocate's integrity, followed by that advocate responding with documented facts about the justice's own ethical issues. I've never seen anything like it in that chamber. On MSNBC, the commentary focused on the substantive impact of the exchange. What makes Crockett's response so powerful, noted a legal analyst, is that she didn't just defend herself, she redirected focus to the actual evidence of voting discrimination while exposing the hypocrisy of the attack on her integrity. She did it with facts, not emotion, in a way that left Thomas visibly stunned. Even on Fox News, some legal commentators acknowledged the effectiveness of her approach. "Whatever you think of her politics," said one conservative analyst, Congresswoman Crockett showed extraordinary poise under pressure. When her integrity was questioned, she responded with specific, documented facts rather than general denials or counterattacks. That's effective advocacy, regardless of the politics involved. The reaction extended far beyond traditional media. Law professors announced they would include transcripts of the exchange in their professional ethics courses. Social media users across the political spectrum shared clips of her most powerful moments, often paired with commentary about integrity in public life and the judiciary. "I've never seen a Supreme Court exchange go viral like this," remarked a CNN media analyst. "What makes it so compelling isn't just the drama but the substantive way Congresswoman Crockett responded to a personal attack with documented facts that exposed the hypocrisy of the attack itself." The White House responded cautiously, with the press secretary stating only that the administration respects the independence of the judiciary and the important role of oral advocacy in our legal system, while avoiding direct comment on the substance of the exchange. For Thomas himself, the aftermath appeared uncomfortable. Court watchers noted that he was unusually subdued during the following week's oral arguments, asking significantly fewer questions than had become his custom in recent years. Several sources reported that some justices had expressed private concerns about the appropriateness of his questioning, though these reports remained unconfirmed given the court's tradition of confidentiality. "Justice Thomas faces a unique challenge now," observed a former Supreme Court clerk speaking anonymously to the Washington Post. Congresswoman Crockett didn't just defend herself, she highlighted documented ethical issues that raise questions about his own integrity while he sits in judgment of others. That creates an uncomfortable dynamic, not just for this case, but potentially for his broader role on the court. Inside legal academic circles, the discussion went deeper than the immediate confrontation. Constitutional scholars and ethics experts began publishing analyses of the underlying ethical questions Crockett had raised about Thomas's participation in cases involving his wife's political activities and his former clerk's organization. What makes Crockett's response so significant, wrote a prominent legal ethics professor, is that she didn't just make accusations. She cited specific, documented instances where Justice Thomas's conduct raised serious ethical questions by standards that would apply to any other federal judge. By doing so, while defending her own integrity, she forced a broader conversation about ethical standards on the nation's highest court. For Crockett herself, the aftermath brought both intense scrutiny and newfound prominence across the political spectrum. Her congressional office reported receiving thousands of messages from Americans of all political persuasions, many expressing appreciation for her courage in speaking truth to power. Congresswoman Crockett demonstrated that integrity in advocacy means standing by factual truth, even when doing so requires challenging those in positions of power, noted a statement from a non-partisan judicial ethics organization. Her response to Justice Thomas's questioning of her integrity exemplified the moral courage we should expect from both advocates and judges in our legal system. The legal community's reaction was particularly significant for highlighting the broader issues of judicial ethics. A bipartisan group of former federal judges signed an open letter calling for the Supreme Court to adopt a binding code of ethics similar to that governing all other federal courts, explicitly citing the Thomas Crockett exchange as evidence of the need for clear standards and accountability. 2 weeks after the argument, an unexpected development occurred. The Supreme Court announced it would adopt a formal code of ethics, including specific provisions regarding recusal in cases involving family members, political activities, and financial interests. While the announcement didn't reference the Thomas Crockett exchange directly, the timing and specific provisions led many observers to see a clear connection. The media narrative continued evolving as reporters investigated the specific ethical issues Crockett had raised about Thomas's conduct. Several major newspapers published investigative pieces examining his participation in cases involving his wife's political activities and organizations run by his former clerks. What began as an attack on an advocate's integrity has transformed into a national conversation about ethical standards at the highest levels of our judiciary, wrote a Washington Post columnist. By responding to that attack with documented facts about her accuser's own conduct, Congresswoman Crockett has forced a reckoning that may ultimately strengthen our democratic institutions. The impact extended far beyond this single case. Ethics reform legislation was introduced in Congress, seeking to establish clearer standards for Supreme Court justices. Legal ethics organizations reported unprecedented public interest in judicial accountability. Law schools across the country expanded their curriculum on professional ethics for both advocates and judges. 6 weeks after the oral argument, the Supreme Court announced it would issue its ruling in Wilson County Voters Coalition versus Texas Election Commission the following Monday. Legal experts remained divided on the likely outcome, though many noted that Thomas's silence following Crockett's response suggested the possibility of a more nuanced approach than his previous voting rights opinions might have indicated. Whatever the specific result in this case, observed Harvard law professor Lawrence Tribe, Congresswoman Crockett has accomplished something remarkable. She's highlighted the connection between personal integrity and institutional legitimacy in our judicial system. That conversation may ultimately be as important as the specific voting rights questions in this case. For Crockett herself, who had begun her career representing clients who often felt powerless against a system stacked against them, the opportunity to speak truth to power at the highest level represented a profound fulfillment of her commitment to equal justice. As she told a group of law students at Howard University the week before the ruling, integrity means standing by factual truth even when doing so is difficult or uncomfortable. That principle applies equally to advocates arguing cases and to judges deciding them. Our democracy depends on both. When the court's decision was finally announced, legal scholars noted something remarkable. The majority opinion, written by Chief Justice Roberts, struck down several key provisions of the Texas law while upholding others, finding that the most restrictive measures impose substantial burdens on the right to vote that fall disproportionately on minority communities without sufficient justification. Most surprisingly to court watchers, Justice Thomas recused himself from the case without explanation. It was an unprecedented move that many interpreted as a direct result of the ethical issues Crockett had raised during oral argument. For voting rights advocates, the decision represented a significant victory, not just in the specific case, but potentially in establishing a more rigorous standard for evaluating voting restrictions nationwide. Legal analysts immediately began assessing whether the court's approach signaled a broader reconsideration of voting rights jurisprudence. What began as a questioning of one advocate's integrity ended with meaningful protection for voting rights and a potential transformation in ethical standards at the court, noted a CNN legal analyst. It's a powerful reminder that speaking truth to power, even at the Supreme Court, can have profound implications for our democracy. The confrontation between Justice Thomas and Congresswoman Crockett had transcended a typical Supreme Court exchange to become something far more significant, a moment that highlighted the essential connection between personal integrity and institutional legitimacy in our democratic system. By responding to an attack on her integrity with documented facts about her accuser's own ethical issues, Crockett had not only defended herself, but potentially strengthened both voting rights protections and ethical standards at the nation's highest court. As legal scholars, advocates, and citizens studied the implications of both the decision and the ethical reforms it helped catalyze, one thing became clear. Those 30 seconds when Congresswoman Crockett exposed Justice Thomas's own ethical issues while defending her integrity would be remembered not just for their dramatic impact, but for their substantive contribution to strengthening the ethical foundations of American democracy. Thanks for watching our coverage of this historic confrontation between Justice Clarence Thomas and Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. If you found this analysis eye-opening, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth coverage of the crucial legal and ethical debates shaping our democracy. Comment below with your thoughts on integrity in public service and how speaking truth to power can transform our institutions.